I think everyone can agree that this movie was completely unnecessary. The story was finished, Indy rode off to the sunset, no more needed to be said. I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones. I've played the games, read the books, seen the movies. I knew good and well that this movie wouldn't be great, but I wanted to see if it would at least be good. The trailers that came out didn't make me super hopeful, but I decided to hold my judgment until I watched the movie. Now that I've seen it, I think we should talk about it. We start off in 1945 with CGI Indy. De-aging has come a long way, but I really don't like the use of it. This isn't 1984 and Harrison Ford just doesn't look like this anymore, and that's fine. The whole de-aging thing comes from not letting franchises die, and that's half the reason it's used now. What sucks is that whenever a new IP is introduced, it often fails because it either isn't that good or interesting as a concept, or there just isn't enough name recognition. Moral of the story, let stories die and let people age. The CGI Indy segment is pretty fun as long as Indy isn't at a weird angle. The action is pretty engaging, but once Indy gets on top of the train, things were dragged out and I started to get bored. After that we get present day Indy. Indy is divorced and miserable, which just feels wrong. I hate this trend of iconic Harrison Ford characters becoming lonely losers when they're old. Indy and Marion end up back together at the end anyway, so the writers seemingly just wanted to make him as sad as possible, yet also the moral compass who should be listened to. Into the Spider-Verse did this with Peter B. Parker, but they also made it clear he was still a good Spider-Man. Up until he meets Helena, Indy seems closer to George McFly than he does to the real Indiana Jones. Indy gets completely ignored and disrespected by his students, to the point where he asks who did the homework, and all the kids don't even pretend to have done it. At the very least, Indy isn't a complete bumbling fool, and he can handle himself. When Phoebe Waller-Bridge was cast, a lot of people thought she would be the one teaching Indy, but it is completely the other way around. Helena is a thief who runs out on her debts, and even when she tries to act holier than thou to Indy, he shoots her down immediately. The fact that the lesson Helena has to learn is that stealing is bad, and that there's more to life than being a liar and a cheat, makes this movie feel like it was meant for kids. But the movie's PG-13, meaning most parents wouldn't take their kids. Even if they did, I was in preschool when the last Indy movie came out, and the only reason I like the franchise is my dad specifically getting me those games. Indiana Jones is not popular for kids today, so if you want to add a message, it should be aimed for the age range of the fans who watched the movies back in the 80s, because they're the ones who will come to the theater to watch. At least theoretically they will. I noticed that Helena calls Indy a grave robber, and that's an argument I see way too often when it comes to artifacts in museums and countries outside of their origin. The next time someone brings it up, just keep in mind that a lot of times when the artifact is left in its home country, there's a good chance that it gets destroyed. I like the dynamic between Helena and Indy, but adding a Short Round wannabe made things feel clunky. Short Round had great chemistry with Indy, and when it comes to Teddy and Helena, that same chemistry is a far-off dream. The kid playing Teddy is a decent actor, but he feels tacked on. In a movie that is 2 hours and 20 minutes, you want to make sure that there isn't any aspect that could cause an audience to check out, and as I type this script, I'm starting to realize that a lot more of this movie could have been cut down than I originally thought. The subplot of the black girl working with the Nazis pretty much went nowhere, Helena's engagement to a Sonny Corleone wannabe was weird, and Indy begging to die at the end of the movie. All of that stuff didn't need to happen, yet it did. People might like getting more of a look into Indy's current world, but I really feel like the pace of this movie is being sacrificed for that, and it shouldn't have to be. The main villain of this movie is being played by Mads Mikkelsen, who isn't scary or intimidating in the slightest. I've seen him be a bone-chilling psychopath in movies before, so this just doesn't live up in the slightest. This was supposed to be a brilliant scientist who was integral to putting man on the moon, yet he is completely incompetent in the most important moments. Dr. Schmidt or Voller or whatever was a complete waste of a great actor. In all honesty, you could just shove a random actor in and nothing would change. Given how the movie cost well over $300 million to make, maybe they should have given a new face a try if they weren't going to make an imposing villain. As it stands, it looks like they saw the past roles Mads Mikkelsen did and thought that just having him as a villain would make their villain more memorable, and it didn't work. The climax of this movie is a mixed bag. Voller goes back in time, but because of continental drift, he goes back to 212 BC. Keep in mind that this is the man who supposedly put man on the moon, yet he didn't take this into account. But Indy, who is an archaeology professor, thought of it as soon as he had a moment. The henchmen trying to shoot the Romans with pistols was really stupid. I have no clue how they thought that would work, given that they're trained. They would know that they can't hit a person with that gun from this far away. Voller whimpering as he met his end felt pretty fitting. The fact that Voller went out like this undermines his threat level even more, and people will not want to return next week to watch again when they know the main villain is a wimp, which will hurt the box office even more once word of mouth begins to spread. I really didn't like Indy not wanting to go back to his time. Indy feels broken, and I know that he's been through a lot, but his refusal to see reason is so annoying. You might think that Indy just wants to be in the world he spent his life learning about, but he's been shot. You might not remember that because he's pretty much fine and this isn't the first time he got shot and shrugged it off, but if Indy stays here he will not last long at all, so I'm glad Helena made him go back to the present. I find it funny that when Indy asks who he should keep living for, the two just sit in silence for like 30 seconds. I know Marion was on the way, but Helena could have said something, anything. It almost seems like an intentional joke, but it can't be, so it just seems like an odd editing choice as is. To be fair, there are a lot of odd choices in this movie.
This is the end.
So this movie wasted a lot of potential, and it seems like Indiana Jones is done, at least for the next 15 years or so, and this doesn't feel like a great send-off. I like the fact that Indy could still do a little bit, but his attitude didn't really work for me. Indy losing his son was an insane revelation, and it completely blindsided me, and it felt like the fact that they couldn't get Shia LaBeouf made them tank Indy's life. Indiana Jones was meant to be a story frozen in time, and even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was pushing it. Indy used to be a character who felt like a myth because of all the amazing things he did, and now Indiana Jones is just another guy who can throw a punch, nothing more, nothing less. When we end the movie with Indy and Marion being back together, it doesn't feel earned in the slightest because the only thing we hear about her before her reappearance is that she doesn't want to talk to Indy. Indy's character just doesn't feel right, and that feeling reverberates throughout the story.